Michael. And it changed as of the 11 p.m. update. Now, it's gotten a little bit stronger yet. And that part was expected, and it's defying the odds in terms of having a westerly shear in the upper atmosphere. It would tend to normally rip a storm apart a little bit, but this is defying the odds a little bit and continuing to strengthen. It's now got an eye on it quite clearly, so it has intensified a little bit. It was 75 miles an hour this morning at 11. Then it was 80 miles an hour at 5 o'clock, 85 degrees at 8 o'clock this evening, and now it's 90. There's where it is, center of it located right about into here. Moving to the north at about 12 miles an hour. Not a real rapid movement here coming up in the next 2 days, but then after that, it's going to motor. We'll show you here. Here's where things are by tomorrow morning at 8. Moving slightly west of due north, again, about 12 miles an hour, 105 mile an hour winds, 115 mile an hour winds by Tuesday evening, coming up at 8 o'clock. On into Wednesday morning, 120 mile an hour winds. The forecast track is really looking like it's going to be pretty accurate. You'll notice how narrow that cone is. However, the forecast strength can always be off. They're notoriously tough to forecast in terms of its intensity. So it could be a little stronger, could be a little weaker than that as well. So we'll have to watch that real carefully. They'll have to watch that very carefully on down near Panama City, where it's likely to make landfall somewhere in that vicinity by noontime coming up on Wednesday. Now, that's a little bit faster projection of where it's supposed to be, just a tiny bit, a couple of hours faster. But then once it gets beyond southwest Georgia and motors across Georgia, South Carolina, and into North Carolina from Wednesday evening at 8 on into Thursday evening at 8. Look how close it is to us. It was supposed to be back on into here. However, now it's starting to really motor. And because it's moving so rapidly, it retains a little bit more of its strength. 50 mile an hour winds. Now, it would likely, as of the last update, it had a much wider cone. It was reaching from Hatteras, about where it is now, but all the way on up to Charlottesville. Now it's on into the Richmond area on the western fringe of the cone and likely to move on to areas just north of the Albemarle Sound if it does indeed take that center line right on through here. But that cone has gotten a little bit narrower coming up by Thursday evening at 8. So with this projection, it's likely that we're going to see things start a little bit earlier on in terms of bands of heavy rain and some wind with this. Now, with the wind, with the storm being a little bit farther southward, that means it's a little bit closer to the coastline, and the more rapid movement means it maintains its wind a little bit longer as well. So we can see a little bit more wind than earlier projections. There's not going to be a full-fledged hurricane. It'll likely be a tropical storm as it comes on through. Quick, heavy rain, but a little bit more wind than earlier expectations. By 11 o'clock at night, it's moving on offshore. So really the rain should come to an end in the pre-dawn hours, really after midnight sometime, coming up on Thursday night. And by Friday, I kind of doubt that we're going to see much rain at all, but we will see a strong northwesterly wind for a time during the first part of the day on Friday, in the pre-dawn hours and the first part of the day on Friday. This thing circulates counterclockwise, so with that wind coming in out of the northwest as it moves offshore, I think by Friday morning we'll see some brisk northwesterly winds, and it moves on off into the Atlantic. So that's the movement out of it. Some heavy rain, but I think as much as we earlier projected. Some wind, a little bit more wind than we earlier projected out of this thing. So I think we could see 1, 2, maybe 3 inches of rain as this cold front arrives on Friday and moves on into the region Thursday night and Friday. That the storm will become absorbed really within that cold front. It'll kick on offshore or it'll kick on out ahead of the cold front, moving on through the region. So that's what's going on with that. Here's where everything is. We're going to take it between now and Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. Tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning, upper 60s, low 70s for a low, and really kind of status quo for the weather coming up on Tuesday. Rain, yeah, a good shower, but most of us won't likely see much of any rainfall for the day. Mid-80s, low to mid-80s for the day, once again coming up on Tuesday. Wednesday, not much of a change there either, but we start to see something. Here's we are in the middle of the afternoon, late afternoon, 84, 85, 86, southeast winds at 15, and here's an outer band showing up in this medium range forecast model, showing up by Wednesday evening at 7. So by Thursday, we'll start to see some of these move on into the region, likely by Thursday afternoon. Now, this is an old run of the forecast model of the Euro. It's a little bit old. They only update twice a day with this one, so it's a little bit old. It hasn't done the evening update as of yet. It takes a long time to do. There's where things are by 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursday. Well, really, I tend to think we're going to see some of that rainfall by 4 o'clock in the afternoon for us. I think the storm will likely be closer to here than actually here. In other words, southeast of Charlotte, North Carolina, closer to I-95. They don't need the heavy rain there, but at least it's going to move through quickly. Now, it's still got the rain into the area at 7 o'clock in the morning. I think that'll happen likely around midnight on Thursday night now, 5, 6, 7 hours early. But look at the winds out of this, 55-mile-an-hour winds at Hatteras, 30-mile-an-hour winds for Virginia Beach. The coastal winds really be gusty. And again, that'll likely happen a little bit earlier. Push this up a little bit earlier. I think this will happen closer to 6, 7 o'clock in the morning when we see these winds start to come in out of the north and northwest on Friday. But I think it'll still happen. And still some strong winds during the day on Friday. But then that drops on off Friday night. Saturday, we cool off. Again, remember there's that cool front. There's where things are Saturday afternoon at 4. Into Sunday, we warm back on up a little bit. I don't think we'll warm up that much on Sunday and Monday. And then Tuesday, there's a cold front that'll be off to our north. And that cold front will provide some more cool area to the area after a brief warm-up coming up on Tuesday. Relatively brief heavy rain. I'm tending to think instead of 2 to 3 inches, I'm tending to think it'll be 1 to 2 inches. Tidal flooding, kind of questionable. Might see a little bit at the Outer Banks or Albemarle Sound. But again, I've got that little to no impact. And then damaging winds, gusts of 45 to 55 miles an hour. I might bump that bar a little bit farther up with some impact. Tornadoes, little to no impact. However, I might want to bump that just slightly over, just a touch. We could still see an isolated tornado coming up out of this thing with a closer movement of this thing. But I tend to think that most of them will be south of the actual eye of the storm. So it would be farther southward into North Carolina if there would be. But we'll watch that carefully. Nothing in the really high impact category. But I'm going to bump that wind gust up, I think, for tomorrow if things go as planned. That's what's going on with that. Thursday noon into early on Friday. That's going to be the biggest impact out of it for the area. And likely by early Friday, I mean pre-dawn hours, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And then Friday, we'll still see some wind, but it'll be out of the northwest as the storm moves away. 12-hour, 2 to 3 inches of rain, could be just 1 to 2. We'll have to watch that for forecast model updates. And wind gusts 45 to around 55 mile an hour plus coming up on Thursday late and on into early on Friday morning. And that would be right at the coastline. Little bit less wind inland, but I think everybody's going to get some wind out of this. Status quo next couple of days. But then once we get to Thursday, watching Michael very carefully. A little bit faster movement of the storm could put the bulk of the storm, the brunt of the storm, between around Thursday noon and on into the very early hours of Friday. Likely a stray shower on Friday morning, if at all. I think it'd be the pre-dawn hours really that we'd see it. So we'd see some wind coming up Thursday night and into Friday very early in the morning.